think it's super exciting because people are seeing that they have a diverse set of skills and that corporate America is not necessarily fulfilling them in a lot of ways that they need to be fulfilled. I think people are excited to be creative, take risks.
In recent episodes, we've seen examples of unique career paths, ones that involve mashing up various skills and experiences to achieve career fulfillment and success. But how can you create this personal mashup while also delivering impact in wider society? Annette Grotheer is a doctor, healthcare advocate, and founder of the Shopdox, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bring preventative care back to the minority community. Dr. Grotheer believes that parallel pathing of passion and purpose with both traditional employment and entrepreneurial ventures is how people can make the most impact possible in and out of the workplace.
In my mind, this whole entrepreneurial spirit comes from a desire to improve the world around us. For me, seeing so many people wanting to branch out and start their own business, I think that's super exciting because they're trying to challenge the status quo. Like, oh, hey, like I don't have to do what society has traditionally told us to do. I don't have to be a consumer. I can be a creator. I really think there's this like trend towards people wanting to have more of an impact on the world around them, which I think is really beautiful.
So what does it take to create that traction, which taps into your diverse interests, experiences, and goals? Welcome to Strategic Momentum, the pod course with actionable tips, inspiring stories, and practical advice from progressive leaders on what it takes to break through business and career inertia and understand the business of work. I'm your host, Connie Steele. COVID-19 has meant we've all had to change our day-to-day working lives, but this particular impact has been felt more in the healthcare sector than others. Workers are rising to new challenges and multitasking in areas they never could have imagined this time last year. So it's unsurprising that the concepts of career mashups and parallel pathing come naturally to today's guests and Forbes 30 Under 30 Class of 2020 recipient, Annette Grotheer, MD. Throughout her career to date, she's made strategic choices to ensure she's been able to deliver meaningful and lasting contributions while still progressing in her career. While some of us find our purpose later in life, Annette's childhood shaped her goal of global impact at a young age. Let's learn more about her career journey.
I was actually born abroad in Liberia, and there was a very long civil war that occurred, and I had the opportunity. My dad was able to bring me back to the U.S. So I grew up in the U.S., and my mother stayed in Liberia. And so like all while I was growing up, I had all these fantasies of going back to Liberia and what it would be like. And actually, when I went back, I definitely was welcomed with open arms, but it was like my first time out of the country, my first time seeing a third world country, let alone anything outside of the US. And they were in a post-war setting. The capital didn't even have running water. You saw like the things that are probably hidden here in the US out in the open. So all these people with deformities, like all the sick and ill are in the streets. And it's just like so very obvious what the disparity actually is between what we have here in the US and then what they were going through. So it was one of those very eye-opening experiences in so many ways. And that was, it really did motivate me to want to give back in a meaningful way. Like I wanted to be able to develop some skills that other people couldn't necessarily, these things people couldn't do for themselves, offer a service. And I feel like healthcare is one of the best ways to do that. I really thought I wanted to go and start a clinic in Liberia, work with women's health. And through my career, my motivations have changed, but it's definitely something that I'm still excited about. Yeah, so that's part of why I wanted to go into medicine.
This desire to help those in need also hit home on a very personal level.
In the US, my adoptive mom, so I have two moms, my adoptive mom definitely did have a lot of chronic health conditions. Like she struggled with a lot of pain conditions. And part of the thing that was so challenging to see her go through this was the fact that a lot of people stigmatize things like fibromyalgia. They say that they're more like psychiatric conditions. They dismissed a lot of her concerns. And she really did struggle to find people who were advocates for her. And so I think that's another one of the reasons why like I am so passionate about advocating for people on this like personal level, where a lot of people are ignored and their complaints are pushed to the side, whether it's because the doctor's busy or they don't know what's going on, so they can't like put a finger on it and give her a solution. I just remember seeing her struggle with that so often. And I think that's another one of the motivations for going into medicine, to be able to advocate for people who may not be able to advocate for themselves in that setting.
While these experiences were underlying motivations for pursuing her eventual medical profession, Annette tells us that being a doctor wasn't even on her radar in the beginning.
I actually had no idea I wanted to be a doctor until like after I had graduated, after I had worked for a couple of years, and I actually ended up going back to do what they call a post-bac and had like a second career. So started out, went through high school, went to college, thought I wanted to be like a psychologist or something along those lines. Then that changed. I thought I wanted to do research. So I pursued that after graduating. I went to Boston. I started doing HIV research, cervical cancer research. So it's kind of along this healthcare field, but like skirting actually being a doctor. And during that research time, I got to work with these people who were physicians, and they also had an MPH, and they were doing all the research that I was doing. But then they got to do the fun stuff where they were sitting down with patients, talking to them about how they could actually like improve their lives, looking at like the nitty gritty of what was actually causing them to be sick, but in a very personal way, as opposed to a more formulaic, logic-driven, hands-off
clinical.
Approach.
Sounds like pretty research. Clinical, yeah, right?
Exactly. It wasn't until I saw that in action, and actually like this one woman that I worked with was just like so great with her patients, and I would like eavesdrop on what she was doing instead of like what I was doing. A lot of the doctors you run across are like older white men, to be honest, and I have absolutely nothing in common with them. It was very refreshing. This was a young woman. She was like starting a family. She was doing all of the things that like in my heart, I felt like I wanted to accomplish eventually, but just like seeing her doing it just made it so much more realizable. And it just like made it so tangible that I knew if I did like X, Y, and Z, because that's what she did, that I could get to where she was. And I think that's when I realized that, hey, maybe I should consider this. Honestly, part of the reason I never thought about it before was because it's so much work. And I was like, I don't want to go to school for that long. It's going to be a ton of loans. Like there's so many reasons that I could say that I shouldn't go down this path. But I think after seeing her in action, I was just so motivated and ended up starting the path to going to medical school.
Having a role model who represented the possibilities and broke the norms of what a traditional and conventional doctor reflected was a critical driver in Annette's decision to make that pivot and pursue the profession. This passion for advocacy, coupled with her purpose to deliver impact, eventually led her to parallel path her medical career with establishing a healthcare nonprofit, the Shopdox.
So the Shopdox is a nonprofit that goes into barbershops and does preventative health screenings while men and women wait to get their hair cut. For me, I think this kind of like stems back to advocating for communities that really need that advocacy. The minority community is one of those communities. They have the worst health outcomes from pretty much any disease that you could think of. And so I saw that in my community, especially men were having really bad outcomes from high blood pressure. And I had actually worked with this organization that did similar work. They were doing all of this preventative healthcare. They were educating people. They were talking about nutrition, exercise, all of these things that we think about being related to health, but we don't necessarily emphasize and educate. Like people don't learn about this in schools. Like a lot of schools don't have these sorts of health education programs. We really go into the barbershops. We provide education. We provide screenings. We connect people to care. And it's really cool because we're partnering with the barbers who are already these like staple members of the community who have the trust of all their patrons. Like these people trust them almost with their lives. Like they're letting them cut their hair. They really trust them so much. And by us working with these people that they already trust, we almost are able to break down this distrust of the healthcare system, because there really is this like barrier between physicians and the people that we want to be helping, just because they don't necessarily think we have the best motivations behind what we're doing. They think we want money. They think that we're willing to negate whatever their best interests are for our personal gain. And it's a very persistent and prevalent perception of healthcare, especially in the minority community. So we're trying to battle that by working with barbers, by going into communities, and by giving our time freely to try to connect with people like in a comfortable setting, casual conversation, introducing these conversations about health into the barbershop, like gossip. Like we're talking about football, we're talking about girls, we're talking about blood pressure. Like we can fit it all in. And people are like a captive audience. They're sitting there waiting to get their haircut. They don't really have anything else to do. Maybe out of boredom, maybe out of like interest, they come and talk to us, and hopefully we're able to teach them something new about their health and improving their health.
That's a really innovative idea in being able to create and deliver such an impact to a audience in which you're quite passionate about. How did you even come up with the idea to begin with to do something like that, where obviously you've always wanted to have an impact? This is a way that you're creating a double impact, in fact. Yeah. But where did the idea start from?
Yeah, so barbershop-based programs are not new. Community outreach, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to impact health. I'm really passionate about community healthcare workers. A lot of the things in healthcare that people struggle with are not like that complicated. It's like, when do I take my medication? How do I access these resources? Who do I even contact if I have this problem? These are all very simple things. So you can have community members, like for example, talking about the barbers or our volunteers, who can explain so many of these things that have such a huge impact on health. And I saw that through different programs I'd worked with in Boston. We did like community walk sessions, and we really capitalized on the fact that like community members care so much about their peers, their neighbors, even more than like we as outsiders, because as physicians, we're kind of outsiders. These are people who are invested. And so we're partnering with these invested people. I think this concept of community-based programs is so powerful and underutilized.
Annette's interest and focus on community-based programs, particularly of minority ones, originally stemmed from the fulfilling volunteer work she did during her college years in Colorado. These efforts had shown her the power of being able to truly motivate and educate others by delivering consultative and personal support. That was the inspiration for Shopdox, which was the basis for her master's in public health degree capstone project. Rather than writing a paper for that project, she knew she wanted to make a lasting impact and find ways to educate and advocate for minorities in these underserved communities. And this was all in addition to her Doctor of Medicine degree that she was pursuing.
I actually was able to volunteer with an organization that did similar work in Colorado. And I ended up getting into medical school and moving and really missing working with that organization. And so I was like, I'm here in Miami. We have the same problems, maybe even worse. I'm here for an MPH to be doing public health work. Like, why don't we just get things rolling here? And I was able to actually start this program as part of my capstone for my master's. And I was able to work with this organization called SNMA that I was president of, and integrated that as one of our community outreach projects, wearing all the hats at once and trying to accomplish something a little bit more tangible, a little bit more longstanding than just writing a paper for my capstone. So that's how things started, where the idea came from. I was inspired by Dr. Williams, her program in Colorado. And then when I moved to Miami, it really just fit a lot of the little puzzle pieces of things that I wanted to be working on and the impact I wanted to have while I was a medical student.
Wow. So you really found this intersectionality of being able to have impact on a community that you already were quite passionate about. You had done it before, but then you're able to layer in the medical training that you have, and then subsequently find a way to become an insider versus an outsider in an experience, or finding that place where the experience is such that they're so comfortable where you can really help educate them in the way that you want. With the Shopdox, Annette identified a way to mash up her community advocacy with her medical training and created alignment between passion and purpose while fulfilling an unmet need. But how did she build on this foundation, create traction, and grow the business? What were the steps that you took to build the momentum? You had leveraged your knowledge based on being part of a program in Colorado, but you're starting this from scratch still, and it's become a pretty full-fledged business. So how did you go about really building that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think I didn't know that this was exactly what I was thinking about when I was planning things out, but I would say that I really focused on the key, like what was the skeleton, like the backbone, the essential function of the program. So for me, the essential function of the program was this education. So once I identified that, I was able to figure out like who is the best person to give this information. Like I could do it all. I could bring in experts. I could train people to do it. But I was trying to be as efficient as possible. So I'm like, who already knows about blood pressure? Medical students, pre-med students. Who wants to volunteer? Medical students and pre-med students. I tried to tap into some of the people who were out there who already had an interest in what I was doing, who already had a little bit of baseline knowledge that I could really, they're amazing. They come in and they have all of this knowledge and they're super passionate about volunteering. I was able to use a group of people that were already aligned with what I was doing. So being able to identify that population early and quickly was very, I think, instrumental in being able to be successful in the program. And then I think like the messaging it's like so simple, but yet so like it addresses so many problems at the same time. I think that the simplicity of it made it so easy for people to connect to. We could talk about like the nitty gritty, like the stats of what we're doing, just like the underlying medical, like pathophysiology. But you can go deep into the depths of like the technicalities of what we're doing. But on the surface level, anyone can relate to our mission. Like we're going and we're reaching this population who doesn't have access to healthcare. A lot of the people who we get support from already have been to the barbershop. They know what the setting is like. They know how great it is to have like these sorts of conversations. So the simplicity of it and the messaging of it, I think, was also really important for us gaining traction and getting support from all different groups of people. A lot of people could relate with what we were doing.
Was it something that you had to somewhat test and learn along the way? Or was it something in which you're like, no, I know if I just do this and this, that it's going to be all clear and that should help pave the way?
Yeah, I had a framework laid out for me. So that was very helpful. But I think it would be remiss to ignore some of the things you discover along the way. So like I knew what my program was going to be, what sorts of like messaging, like what sort of messages we were going to pass on. I had a very clear understanding of what I wanted it to be. But in healthcare, particularly, there are specific needs for specific populations. And I really wanted to focus on connecting with that and trying to keep my ear to the ground and being flexible, knowing that maybe what I thought this program should be is not necessarily what it actually should be to provide the biggest impact. And I think that's something that can apply to so many different types of businesses, is that you like know what you want to sell, but like, is that actually the service that people need or the product that people need? And as many ways as you can test that and trial it, I think that's going to be super powerful for you having the most impact. So for example, we do surveys at every one of our sites to try to answer specific questions. Like, are we reaching the population we think we're reaching? Do they have information or knowledge about like the types of things that we're teaching them? Or do we need to be teaching them different things than we're talking about? So we continually asking those questions and trying to collect that data to try to see if we're doing what we think we're doing, first of all, and if that's what people actually need, second of all.
What I hear is that you have always been trying to figure out what's the best product market fit, and that based on feedback from the target audience, you're constantly tweaking or trying to craft the best experience so that at the end of the day, you can have maximum impact. continual iteration, improvement, and in a lot of cases, a complete change in business operations has been front and center with COVID as businesses learn to adapt and adjust to this sudden shift. So how has the pandemic affected the Shopdox? And what pivots has Annette had to make?
We're fortunate in the fact that we were able to just shut down our in-person sessions. We tried to focus more on just like education and using technology in the best way that we can. So that's still an evolving thing. And I think in a way, it's almost fortuitous that this happened because I think we should have been capitalizing more on technology in the first place. We should have been trying to have this be something you don't have to necessarily be in person to gain some of the insights and information that we're providing. So it's caused like a little bit of a creative seed, planted a little creative seed for me as far as what can we do to get this information out without even being in person at these sites. And I think we would be remiss if we weren't trying to capitalize on that as well, because this information should be available, should be accessible, even if you aren't able to come into one of our barbershop sites.
So how did you pivot and how are you providing some of this information virtually now?
Yeah, so we've been trying to capitalize on our social media. We've been really trying to work with our network, trying to get them as engaged as possible. I've continued conversations with barbers to try to identify new sites as well as get a pulse what they think they need, because we also want to try to partner with our barbers and support them however we can. And then what they think their patrons might need. We've tried to expand some of our services related to like health insurance enrollment. I think a lot of people had this like eye-opening experience that they aren't as infallible as they think they are, and they maybe need health insurance because COVID was a huge eye-opener. So we've tried to expand that a little bit as well. But we're really trying to work on like video information, little snippets, little posts that we can share that are easily digestible, quick, but still continuing that messaging of what we're trying to share at our in-person sites.
Testing, learning, and iterating is so crucial in today's world to provide what is actually needed versus what you think is needed. Plus, it helps you adapt when change and uncertainty is constant. And just as traditional healthcare systems may not meet the needs of every individual, neither does the linear, singular path to career success. It was clear to Annette that she wasn't going to be able to fully achieve her goals by taking one route. Annette sees the potential for disruption and progress through one's own career mashup.
I think it's super exciting because people are seeing that they have a diverse set of skills and that corporate America is not necessarily fulfilling them in a lot of ways that they need to be fulfilled. I think people are excited to be creative, take risks. And there, in my mind, this whole entrepreneurial spirit comes from a desire to improve the world around us. For me, seeing so many people wanting to branch out and start their own business, I think that's super exciting because they're trying to challenge the status quo. Like, oh, hey, like I don't have to do what society has traditionally told us to do. I don't have to be a consumer. I can be a creator. So I think it's just coming from, hopefully people are getting inspiration from each other. I think availability of information, but I really think there's this like trend towards people wanting to have more of an impact on the world around them, which I think is really beautiful.
Have you always parallel path multiple things and throughout your life too?
Yeah. I definitely get bored very easily. And so constantly challenging myself, constantly trying new things. That's probably like my life mantra is that I constantly want to be trying new things in a new way, in a new place, any way that I can discover some sort of novelty. I feel like that helps me to grow as a person, that helps me to broaden my horizons. And if I'm not discovering new things, then I'm sitting still. And that's when the boredom kicks in. So I definitely have always been that person. Like in college, I was trying to do like a modeling career. I dabbled with that and I had like a tie-dye business. And then I also had my jobs in school and research that I was doing. So I think just like having that diversity of interests and projects going on helped to stimulate like the different parts of my personality and my different interests and kept all of it thriving. I wasn't just feeding one part of myself. I was feeding the dynamic nature of my personalities. Definitely. I pride myself in that. And med school is actually pretty challenging in the sense that I couldn't do as many things as I used to. Like I had to pick two. And I was very like reluctant to do that. But I think sometimes you have to make those choices.
Where do you think people struggle most, though, in being able to realize this vision of multiple careers? Because I agree with you. What I am seeing is that there's a desire to have more of a portfolio career, a mashup, I like to call it, where you have the ability to be exposed to different experiences that, to your point that you said, stimulate your brain, that align to the different facets of you. And I think many people are not one-dimensional anymore. They want to express their interests and passions in multiple ways, but it's not always easy. So what do you think gets people stuck in being able to realize this mashup?
Yeah, I actually recently, a lot of people have been reaching out to me, brainstorming these sorts of things, like how can they start their new business? They have these really cool ideas, but they're like stuck at the point of where do I start? So I think that's a huge one for people. And then I think there's a lot of people who want to have an impact. They're like, oh, I want to do something like what you're doing, but I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? Like I have all this energy, this excitement, this one area, but I don't know what I should do. And so I think that like brainstorming and connecting with I think it's connecting with what fulfills you the most and realizing that you can turn something that you do almost every day into your hustle, your side hustle. That's what I used to call it. These are all my side hustles. So I think like that, where do I start? And then what is it? Like, what does it look like? And I think people have like this very close-minded, like they see other people doing it. They're like, oh, they have a business, so I must like sell people things. And that's how like I can have a business. But that's like such a limited view. And I think people being able to realize like there's so many different things that are a service that you may already do on the day-to-day. Like that could be your side hustle. And it's something you already enjoy doing, obviously, because you're doing it already. Like for me, I was already volunteering and doing this sort of work. I just turned it into something that was my own. And so I think people realizing that they may already be doing their side hustle, they just haven't quite realized that's a service that they can provide or an expertise that they have, and that they could pivot that into something that's your side hustle. That's your mashup. Then you just need to start. That's the other part.
How do you end up juggling two full-time roles then? Did it ever occur to you that you could only do one, given the intensity of now being a resident?
Yeah, I have definitely considered that more recently, but I don't think it was like ever an option to stop. I think for me, the nonprofit is like something that gives me a lot of joy. So especially during med school, it honestly was the thing that I would do when I was like burnt out from studying. I would work on that because I got a lot of fulfillment from working on it. And it allowed me to connect with people on this personal level when in school I'm looking at like molecules and pharmacology and all of this stuff that is, even if you're interested in it, it's boring. I'm not going to lie. I think the fact that my parallel career, if you want to call it that, was something that already fulfilled me and already gave me a lot of joy, made it easy. It didn't seem like I had a second job. It seemed like, oh, this is like my hobby. This is what I do for enjoyment, and it makes me feel good. I feel like I'm having a positive impact. It definitely was a challenge because I probably took away from some of my medical school studies. Like I think I could have gotten way better grades because I was investing a lot of time in this other project. But in the end, like when I look back, I would not change what I was doing. I would not have just like sidelined one thing to focus on just one, because I think you can do both. But I think you really have to have that fulfillment and passion with your side hustle. Otherwise, it will feel like a burden. It will burn you out. And it will be nearly impossible to keep both going, in my opinion.
When you have something that can fulfill you in a way that you're not getting from your other job, that collectively really fuels you forward and actually pushes your potential to achieve more. What I also take away is that there's never one thing that will ever fully satisfy everyone's interests at this point. Everybody has a lot of different interests. So if you can align this passion and purpose with where you can have the most impact, and they may come from different things, not necessarily one thing, that collectively you may even not even realize the level of energy that you have to be able to accomplish all those things. Whereas maybe before people just think, no, I can only handle sort of one track. We all have passions that drive us, but sometimes it can require taking a step back to truly see the bigger picture of how they can all come together in a different and beneficial way. One that creates an interesting hybrid that can propel us forward even faster. Aligning passion and purpose is the quickest route to making a real impact. But it's important to understand what your limitations are, as Annette will tell us. It's understanding what you can do, as well as what's that minimum viable impact you want to have.
With the nonprofit, I knew that I had time limitations. So I definitely structured the organization of what I was doing to reflect that. Like we could have been going and every week doing these sessions, going door to door, like all of these very time consuming things. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, you are able to identify what the backbone, like what the minimal and most important impact you want to have is. If you can focus on that, you can have a really positive, powerful impact with your side hustle or your side gig and have it be like less time intensive. And then if you feel that's the thing that fulfills you more, then you can transition. Like that's kind of the beauty of it. I think it also gives people this kind of like backup, like, oh, hey, I'm way more interested in this now. Like, let me just transition. Let me see what it's like, take that big risk. By starting something and trying something a little, maybe like a little mini version of the business that you want to have. I think that can be really achievable, even if you have like a full-time job or if you're in med school or if you're a doctor, having a very focused and specific mission can help you with the time management, I think.
By taking these small steps, you could see if what you want to do gains traction. You're also parallel pathing to create this multi-threaded career. And along the way, acquiring new skills will be critical to helping you progress. But it really is the people, those important relationships that you will develop along the way that will illuminate where the gaps are and how to bridge them.
It's funny because you don't know what you don't know. I started and I was doing the things that I knew. And then as we started to grow, I was like, I don't even know what to do here. So I think I'll say that these things come up organically. You'll discover what you don't know pretty quickly. And I was able to really capitalize on my network to have these conversations and to capitalize on their expertise as far as potential solutions. And to be honest, those conversations a lot of times would illuminate a lot of things that I was missing, or like maybe this is a skill that I should really be working on, or I need someone who has this skill set in order to take us to the next level. And I think that when you start to level up and the scale gets bigger, that's when you start to realize like, oh, I can't do all of these things. Like I don't have the expertise to do this. Let me honestly capitalize on other people's experience and knowledge. So I've been fortunate in the sense that a lot of people are very excited about the organization and have been willing to help, but we're also bringing in volunteers and staff in order to be able to fulfill all these roles that I can't do and I probably am not that good at and that other people have this great experience and skill for.
That's great. Now, what advice do you have for those trying to break through and be able to act on their visions and interests? So as you mentioned, one of the things that people struggle with is just even getting started. So what advice do you have for them to like break through that challenge of just even trying to get started? They may have a great idea, but moving forward.
So I think the more conversations you have with people, the more questions you ask them, the more questions they ask you about your idea, the easier it's going to be to start, because you'll have such a much more clear vision of what you're actually trying to do. Because I think that's what it is. Like people have this idea, like in the end, we're going to have barbershop clinics. People are going to come there, get their medication. I'm going to be the doctor at these clinics and run them. And that's impossible for me to be like, okay, I'm here and now we have clinics. Like, that's not even feasible. But if I were talking to people and they're like, oh, but like, what are you trying to do? I'm like, oh, I'm really trying to teach them. I really want to focus on health, literacy. That's what I'm actually trying to do. And I can be like, oh, so then what do I need? I need some sort of educational literature and I need someone to educate. And that's the main thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And that's an easy step to take, as opposed to thinking of the end result and where you're going, which you'll probably get there if you keep at it. But figuring out that one specific thing that you can do now that you know how to do, or you can ask someone how to do, I think that's a huge challenge. And I think that would be like the first thing I would suggest people do. And then getting all that feedback. I think the feedback helps you solidify your mission, helps you to be able to explain it to people, which is what you need to get buy-in. And then I think it helps you clarify what you're actually trying to do. And it keeps you focused so that you can say no to the opportunities that don't fit what you're trying to accomplish and say yes to the things that fit perfectly, because you'll recognize it like instantly and be like, yes, we need a partner. You're speaking my language. You're saying the exact same thing that I'm saying. And that's when, you know, the synergy kind of happens and starting is so much easier at that point.
So it's almost breaking down something that seems like such a big, hairy goal into all those smaller pieces, in which you take the smallest piece where you feel most comfortable and that you can move forward. And then you get traction, which starts to build your confidence, which then rolls into the next thing. Then ultimately what you're able to do is then determine the alignment of all the things that you want to do, which then subsequently creates those fundamental synergies that help propel you forward. So to close, what advice do you have for others who are looking to make an impact in a different way and parallel pathing their efforts to do so like you have?
I'm a big proponent for multitasking. So I think picking something that you're already doing in your free time, that maybe you do like part of it in your job, but you're like, oh, we should do it differently. Something that already excites you and you're already spending your free time doing anyways. I would really suggest people to like focus on those things because you're already doing it. You're paralleling there. I would also suggest people try to think of ways to leverage pre-existing systems. For me, like, I'm so happy that the Shopdox is formulated how it is, because we have barbershops all over the country. Literally all we have to do, you know, is talk to the barbers, see if they're interested. Like, the building exists, the space exists, the staff exists. Our volunteers already are educated and what they need to be teaching people. I was able to leverage all these pre-existing systems, and that took so much of the work from what I had to do and allowed us to really put that energy into something else as far as our growth. So I would say leverage pre-existing systems, really capitalize on your prior interests, things that you're already doing as hobbies or things you already have spent a lot of time doing. And then I would say, like, keep talking to people about your idea, because it's going to continue to evolve. You're going to get a much more clear image of what you're trying to accomplish. And once you have that image, once you have that vision, like, other people are going to be able to see it too. And that's when, like, you're talking about, the synergy happens and it just clicks, because you are so, you know, laser focused on what you need to accomplish and want to accomplish. So.
And finally, what's the best way listeners can connect with you?
Yeah, it's the modern era. I'm on LinkedIn, Annette Grotheer. I'm on social media. My personal page is Oh So Natural, OHSONATURAL. And then the Shopdox has a page as well, www.theshopdox.org, or on social media, the Shopdox. So I'd love to hear from you guys. I always love kind of mentoring people, or at least having conversations about what we're talking about, how to get started, or where these creative ideas can come from. So always happy to speak to people.
Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your incredible career mashup story and providing that insight about really starting with that minimum viable place where you can make impact to create just incredible traction and possibly even start this great business while you're parallel pathing on your full-time career.
Multitask. Yes. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the invitation.
Annette's story really resonated with me because it reflects the changing attitudes, mindset, and approach to what a fulfilling career can be in today's work world. As society and life isn't one-dimensional, neither are we. And I believe we all want to find that alignment between our passions and purpose through the work we do. Yet achieving that through one primary career path isn't going to cut it. And like Annette mentioned, people are challenging the status quo. You don't have to only be a consumer. You can be a creator and pursue those interests through a side hustle, which could scale into your primary job over time. It's not just a pipe dream anymore. Because actively engaging in your diverse interests not only stimulates the mind, but fundamentally enables you to reflect who you really are. It comes down to connecting with what fulfills you most and realizing that you can turn something that you've already done, like the case of Annette and her early volunteer work with communities, into a compelling project or business that is truly your own. Yet remember to be clear on that vision while also continuously talking to others to help you gain clarity in learning how to shape and optimize these opportunities. Thanks for listening to Strategic Momentum. To connect with Annette, you can reach her on social media at ohsonatural, that's OOHSONATURAL, and to learn more about the Shopdox, visit theshopdox.org. If you've liked what you heard, please share this podcast with friends and colleagues. And of course, we always appreciate ratings and reviews. To get show notes, links, and more tips and advice from this episode, you can visit us at strategicmomentum.co. There, you can contribute your own tips and help add to the great work and career advice we've collected over the years. Don't forget to follow Strategic Momentum on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Instagram. You can also join the Facebook community by searching Strategic Momentum in groups. I'm Connie Steele, and you've been listening to the Strategic Momentum Podcast.